Welcome to The Broader Edge, candid conversations that envision a new future. Step with us into the edge of evolution as we explore the shifting thoughts, beliefs, and actions that are shaping our tomorrow. Now, join your hosts, Terry Angel, Sheila Cash, Mira Rubin, and Liz Williams for candid conversations that envision a new future.
Hello, ladies.
Hi.
Oh. It takes a little time to get us all here, but we're there.
We're all here, and welcome everyone. Welcome to the listeners to The Broader Edge. I'm Sheila Cash, and I'm here with my co-host, Mira Rubin, Elizabeth Williams, and Terry Angel. And this week, we're going to talk about immunity. You know, this season and this year, we've found ourselves with a real need for a new level of immunity, you know, from COVID and from many of the other enduring emotional and mental events that have been happening even in the last couple of weeks, the stress and the duress from this onslaught of the pandemic. And now, you know, we have really been diving into a new level of consciousness, but we have many more resources than just face masks to tap into, than just sanitizer. We have many other levels of consciousness that are also highly connected to our immunity, to either decrease it or to empower it. I think we would all agree that we're in need of the highest levels of immunity and strength and balance and wholeness right now than we can remember in our lifetimes. So science has shown that there is a connection through the mind and body. And in addition to our physical immunity, we have emotional immunity. We have mental immunity. We have spiritual immunity. And we often skip over these other levels, really just perhaps thinking about supplements or exercise, or, you know, even these days, social distancing. You know, when we think about our efforts in the past decades to strengthen ourselves, all of you might remember, you know, in the 70s that the exercise videos kind of flooded in and filled the shelves. And they were brand new at the time, you know, and that was all about building our strength and our stamina. And psychotherapy had come out of the closet from earlier decades, and that was helping what we think of as our mental level of, you know, strength, of immunity. And even before that, we really had stronger immunity when we were closer to our church communities, our communities of faith, and families lived closer together and were there for us for support as well. And then in the 80s, you know, supplements took off. And then in the 90s, it was yoga and meditation became more mainstream. And then many different diets, from, you know, veganism to keto, and to what is considered immune boosting intermittent fasting, which we, the ladies, we were actually just talking about that. And then, you know, along the way as well, spirituality blossomed into expanded areas, energy healing methods, you know, and different branches of energy healing brought healing to a new level. So now we had many more ways to increase immunity. But now we've all been collectively catapulted into a radical new awareness and the need to pay closer attention. You know, another concept is even herd immunity. So we're hearing about the herd immunity in Sweden. And what is that all about? Does it work? You know, is it the best solution? But what we want to talk about today really is about what are the techniques? What have we used? What is the highest outcome that we can reach for? How can we really amp up in these other levels and to bring awareness to how much we really do have to tap into? What is possible for us in these, these times that we're in now? So I'd love to begin with the question to my co-hosts. When this topic of expanding your levels of immunity came up, when we first began to talk about it a couple of weeks ago, I'm curious, what was the first thought that you had? Where did your mind take you? What sort of new awareness, were you reaching for at that point?
Feels like there's so much we could talk about around immunity. As you described this introduction, Sheila, which is terrific. I mean, there's just so many ways to go. I think, when you first brought up the topic, my thought immediately goes to what I think is so important for each of us, which is this kind of combination of self-care, self-love, and soul care. I kind of put those all together. I think they're all important. And so over the years, I've tried to establish routines in my life that allow me to incorporate some of those, each of those into my life on a daily basis. And for it to become a routine and a part of my life, not just something that I think about or that sounds nice. So, it begins with, as you've mentioned, good nutrition and supplements and exercise. So taking care of our physical body, sleeping well. And of course, whatever we can do to manage our stress, which is huge. So whatever that is, have fun, to lighten up a little bit. But then it goes beyond that to the soul care, which is what are we doing to connect to source? What are we doing to stay centered? Because the world is constantly coming at us, and much of it can be negative, particularly if we're paying attention to the news of the day. And so we have to have practices that allow us to keep coming back to source and center our soul, connecting with our soul and our higher self. And that can be a variety of different things, whether it is meditation, yoga, walks in nature, whatever it is that works for you. But then the deeper piece, I think, where we go from there is to true self-love, where we go beyond just I'm taking care of myself and I'm connecting to myself, but it's actually coming to a place where we just love ourselves unconditionally. All the, the good, the not so good, the challenges, whatever it is that we're dealing with, the shadow, that we learn to love it all and care for it all. And therefore we're better able to love and care for others. So that's where I would begin the conversation.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. And
you kind of covered the gamut there.
That's a lot, yeah. Well,
and just curious as to where did your mind go first, Mira? Like, did it go to, where you have paid attention to immunity, or the idea that there are some, many other areas now that we can tap into? What were your first thoughts about it?
Well, I've been schooled to understand that immunity begins with the health of the gut in terms of physical things. So that would be the first place that my mind went initially, is gut health. What does that look like? How do we do that? How do we take care of our gut biome? And really, I believe that immunity is largely an inside job, additional to the physiological piece. Just to echo what you said, Liz, is creating an environment of peace for oneself, and creating an immunity to fear, and being able to transmute fear into love and life. And that's pretty profound and an important practice for so much. There's so much in our world right now that could engender fear and a feeling of separation. So for me, in terms of a practice that's a strengthening practice, gratitude is super, super powerful to come present, to come to a higher vibration, and to move out of any kind of anxiety or fear. So and actually, in the very beginning of this COVID thing, that's when I was frightened at first. And I went through a few days of anxiety that were pretty extreme, actually. And the way that I got myself out of that was to stop focusing on me and my fear, and to look at how I could serve and what I could give. And as I did that, everything shifted. And this came out of that for me too. This podcast, this group with you, I mean, that was a big part of my motivation. How can I serve? And also a bunch of other things that I've done. And as I put my attention on that, it boosts my internal immunity, emotional immunity.
Well, fear is another pandemic, I think, that we do have globally, and that's a very good point. And to talk about peace and bring peace into that too. And Terry, how about you?
Well, when we first brought up the topic and I heard that word immunity, the first thing that came to mind was protection. So I was like, are we going to talk about protecting ourselves? Which in essence it is. It's learning the skill set though that we need, isn't it, ladies?
Mm-hmm.
It's all about knowing what we have, what's in our toolbox that we can pull out when there's fear that pops up, when there's sadness, when there's any of those low vibrations, the anger. We need to have stuff in our toolbox already. That's our immunity. That's our immune system, if you will, against those emotional highs that really are revved up by incidents or by things that happen to us. We sense they're to us, and to know what we can do. And I loved, Liz, how you were explaining the way we can really start to go inside and we can learn how to meditate. We can learn to be at peace inside of ourselves. It has to start inside. The self-love and self-care has to start with each one of us. If we can't do that, then we can't help anybody else. And the more we raise our frequency by doing all of those things, the meditation, the really becoming more aware of ourselves as a spiritual being aware of the consciousness that's around us, the more we raise our frequency with that, it adds to the frequency of the universe. We all have a voice, and it's our voice mixed in with other voices that's going to help create what we want to see in the world. And I think we might get into that discussion a little bit here today, is what we want to see happen in the world and what's our part in it. And our part is staying in that moment of peace as much as we can, pulling on all of our tools that we have. That's our immunity that we each have.
Yes, that's beautiful too, Terry. And for me, what I went to was the mind body integration and working with all the levels together actually has been a revelation for me in more recent years, more and more, of how the mind and body actually does work together, and what miracles can occur through that. So for each of you, still staying at the personal level for a moment here, as you look back on your life, what can you recall about feeling that you had the least immunity and working on that consciously to really strengthen and bring that up? I think Mira started to go into that a little bit, in your story, Mira. But what practices did you use specifically to strengthen some area from some point in your life to really turn it around?
Well, actually, this goes back to what Liz was saying too, is making self-care a priority. So one of the things that I've done is I have a morning ritual that I am much, much, much more consistent about now than I ever have been. And I'm finding that I don't have to bully myself into doing it. It's actually become a gift that I give myself on a daily basis. And rather than saying, here's my routine, this is what I have to do, oh, I have to do that, it's more like, wow, I am giving myself this amazing gift of meditation, presencing myself, and starting my day from a place where I came first, I feel whole, and I feel empowered and emboldened to take on the day.
Mm. From obligation to gift.
Yeah.
Doesn't that really does turn it around? Yeah. How about you, Liz?
Well, I could talk on, and so I'll try and keep this short. But when you mentioned, I had a real mind-body awareness and awakening probably 10 or so years ago. And it was after spending, I would say, decades of having chronic neck and shoulder pain. And I finally, I got to the point, which happens, where I was just tired of living with it. And I just decided I would actually take time out of my life to figure out what was going on and to see what I might be able to do to heal it if it was possible. And I was kind of aware of the connection, the mind-body connection. In fact, I had been told to look at a book by Dr. Sarno years and years ago, and he was very much a mind-body practitioner. And when I read it at the first time, it was one of those things where you kind of read it and go, well, maybe that's me. It kind of sounds like me, but maybe not. But then when I read the book, another 10 years later or so, I could really realize that was exactly what I was experiencing. So at that point, I started working with a holistic practitioner and was given a book called Unlearn Your Pain. And it was essentially a way to walk through all of the things that might be contributing to whatever you're dealing with. And it wasn't just, for me, it was neck and shoulder pain, but it could be anything. And much of it was writing exercises. So there were a number of questions, and I would go through and write, but they also encouraged you to write unsent letters. So I was, you could go through anybody throughout your entire life who you felt like you might want to say something to. And again, you can say whatever you want. In fact, they encourage you to cuss, use bad language, get it out. You don't have to be a good girl when you're doing this writing, and because nobody's going to see it but you. And it was absolutely life altering. And what was so fascinating, one of the things that I really remember is in Dr. Sarno's books, he talks a lot about rage. And I would think, well, I get a little angry every so often, but I don't think I have rage within me. And when I started to write these letters, I felt like I was vomiting rage onto the page, like it was just pouring out of me. So it was an incredible experience of recognizing that there is so much over the course of our lives that we push down, and for so many reasons. And if we are willing to get it out and to face it and to bring it up, it dissipates. And whatever it is we're experiencing physically can dissipate also. It's very, very powerful, I believe.
Wow, cussing as immunity therapy.
Exactly. But preferably not directly at the person.
So I'm just curious, as a follow-up, why do you think it was in the earlier years when you said you weren't really quite ready for it?
Yeah.
In the later years you discovered that, oh, now you got it. Now you understood the value of it. What was it that changed in those years, do you think, or why, or what was missing in the years where you just weren't quite ready yet?
I think it's possible, and I know we've talked about this before, that I didn't have the time. At the time when it really started to get bad, I had 2 young children. And you know what that's like. I mean, it takes everything you've got. And so the thought of going into your own stuff when you're trying to deal with their stuff and your husband's stuff and whatever else is going on in the world, I think that was part of it, was bandwidth, just not having the time. But I think the second piece was it hadn't been painful enough for long enough. it just gets to that point, I think. I mean, it's the same thing that happens with a cancer diagnosis or something. Sometimes it just has to be so extreme that you finally say, oh, okay, I get it. This is a message I need to heed. But, and unfortunately, if we heard it in the whispers, it wouldn't have to get that bad, but typically we don't. So I think it just got to a point where I had lived with it for so long. I had tried so many other things. That was another, I had tried a lot of things, Reiki and Feldenkrais and other things that can help, massage, and they would help temporarily, but nothing would last. It wasn't until I got to the root cause of what was causing it. So I think it just, sometimes we just wait until we just can't, take it any longer.
Mm-hmm. Well, that actually harkens to the liminal space that we talked about on our last show, and just having the time and the space to deal with it. So that's another affirmation of taking the liminal space to do that too. Yeah. And what about you, Terry?
Well, I'm right there with Liz. I have lived a lifetime of a lot of trauma, a lot of body, physical trauma. And so I was like you, Liz. It was like always trying to put out the fires, and never really getting to the bottom of what was really going on. And then about 35 years or so ago, I discovered meditation. And that changed me. That turned my life totally around, to know that I could take this time for me, and I was totally focused on who I was, instead of this body that just seemed like it had a mind of its own, and it did what it wanted to do, and most of the time it wasn't pleasant. So after discovering meditation, that's where I really got into spirituality, and as opposed to religion, because I had been in a certain religion in my life, and just it didn't agree with me. I mean, that was just me. I just had a lot of questions that weren't answered. So once I found that my spiritual path, then it was a matter of, oh, now I know what to do. Like I was saying earlier, the tools, and I could integrate the physical body with my spiritual consciousness. And I knew that I was a spirit living in this human body. So I spent more time taking care of that spirit, and then I felt the focus was more on that, and the physical body was responding to that. And I did a similar practice to what you did, Liz, with the writing the letters. I actually had gone to a therapist that suggested that as well, to write the letters. And it was very cathartic, and I got a lot of insight from that, which I still think back to this day. I'm like, wow, what if I'd sent those letters? Thank God I didn't. But there's so many ways that we can really use the tools that are out there. There's millions of tools to help us integrate and come to terms with our life that we're living, and see what's it all about. What is this path that we're on? What do I want in this lifetime, and how am I living that? Am I in alignment with that path? And many times when we're not in alignment with that path, we take on some of those old patterns again. We go back into that old behavior, and then the pain starts back up, or the diseases start back up. So it's a matter of really going in and knowing who we are, and clearing out whatever is in there, just getting it all out, so that we can live free and be in coherence with ourselves.
Yes. And
Can I just point out, Sheila, just a second, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just, I think it's so important to note that your body is your ally. I think, Terry, you kind of alluded to it, and I know I felt that you feel as if your body is betraying you. And when you can finally recognize that your body is your ally, and whatever it is you're experiencing is a message. And,
yeah,
and
I did feel that way, Liz. Yes.
Yeah,
that was in the past. It was like, oh, this body is so out of control.
Yeah.
Me, that was out of control.
Yeah, right.
Yes, and I'm so glad you brought that point up, Liz, because I have a series of meditations on cellular consciousness, and it really incorporates creating what emotions and thoughts we actually want to have, and being very conscious about it. But what I discovered through the development of that is that truly our bodies always do have our backs. We're so hard on our bodies. We're so hard on our physicality. We have negative self-talk all the time, especially the female of our population. And that, every heartbeat that your heart beats is beating for you. Every breath that you take, your lungs are taking that breath for you. And we kind of take advantage of that. We forget it. We take it for granted. So that's such a good point, is that, our bodies are always doing the best that they can, which really harkens to epigenetics and kind of bringing in what influence the environment has as well. Because our environment in these recent generations has gotten out of control and has tipped the scales. So we're all trying to find our balance, back to the middle. So that kind of leads me into the next question that I'd love to ask you.
Can I just jump into what you were saying?
Yes.
Yeah, because there are a couple things that come to mind for me. First of all, this was a revelation. You're talking about our bodies being our allies. Our bodies are the way that we experience life. And I think it's so often that we perceive ourselves somehow as separate from our body. My body, this, it, that, what, instead of this is the vehicle through which life is available to me. And to turn that revelation around into an experience of gratitude, like whatever your body looks like or feels like, you wouldn't be looking like or feeling like anything without it. So we couldn't think thoughts without it. We couldn't feel the breeze. We couldn't see the trees and the flowers. And so that actually gave me it's so obvious, right? It's so silly in a way, but it gave me a whole new relationship to my body and the sensations, like all the sensations, whether they're pain or pleasure. We don't get to experience anything without it.
It's so true. Our bodies are our instruments for our consciousness, for our thought. It's our antenna. All of our senses, and of course, I teach sensory development, psychic development, and it's our filter for our understanding, for our emotions, for our everything. So it is quite a revelation, and as I've worked with people, I've really understood more and more of how much we have forgotten that as a species. People just, you just forget it. And especially in this culture where we do have negative talk about how much it doesn't do, or what it looks like, or what it, or how many wrinkles, or, whatever, which is, to abuse and dishonor the body that is, that is keeping us alive, that is what life wants.
Yes.
Life wants to live. And so our cells are always working toward that. And as I said, we've gotten out of balance in many other ways, especially with the environment. But we're hopefully, getting a grip on that. So I'd like to ask, what role does trust take then? Trust, and trusting our bodies, which sort of brings in a trust of our blueprints, a trust of the universe, and what about trust versus personal responsibility? And I bring that up because there, I have known people of different kinds of faith that want to put sort of all of their eggs into the basket of trust, and less in the basket of personal responsibility. Where do each of you stand on that?
I would like to just jump in, because when you talk about trust, this is an example of it. And I think of trust in self and trust in the universe, first of all. But I want to go back to the way that the body is our communication device. It's the way that we experience the world. It's the way that we interpret the world, or the vehicle that we interpret it through. And so one of the things that I've discovered in the context of the core connection work that I've developed is that when I feel a sensation in my body, if I presence myself to that sensation and breathe into it and really truly be present to it, typically it will move and it will dissipate. And I remember one day I had a horrific pain in my back. It was in my shoulder and my back. And I actually spent the day in bed breathing into that sensation, following it around. And oftentimes, what I notice is that there will be a counterpoint, like another sensation that occurs. And if I put my attention on both, it's like closing a circuit. And then something can dissipate and move. And this took me all day. And at one point during that day, I broke down into gales of tears.
Mhm.
And it had to do with an incident with my dad, who has passed now. And there was such grief and uh, constriction around that event, because when we experience emotion, our body is like a biocomputer. It stashes these things all over the place. And so with that release, finally, after being there, trusting, back to trust, trusting my body, trusting my process in being present to it, the pain released and it was gone.
That's a fabulous story. Yeah. And I think what you're speaking to there is the meridians, and in which we can also work with acupuncture and acupressure. But how tied into the emotions that was, and that what a release.
Yeah.
That was incredible. You must have felt so different afterwards.
It was a revelation, and it's really interesting to me that I don't remember the specifics of the revelation at this moment, because when it cleared, it cleared.
Wow.
And I found that as well after I went through this experience with the mind body, that now I'm aware of when my body is talking to me. And I'll do a similar thing, Mira, where I'll instead of getting angry that I'm feeling something, which, I mean, we tend to like, oh, a pain, or, and then hurrying to the medicine cabinet, I will take time to say, what might it be telling me? What might you be saying? And for me, I definitely look at the place where it's showing up. If it's in an arm, a shoulder, what does it mean? Is it about stretching? I found out one time that it was fabulous, where I was having this continual pain in my shoulder. And oftentimes I'll go see my holistic practitioner and he'll just talk with me. And that's that's how I figure it out. But I realized that I said, I really only feel it when I'm stretching. And then it hit me that I was stretching in my life. I was stretching outside my comfort zone. And as soon as I get the awareness of what it might be, it goes away, or will not, maybe not in that moment, but within the next, couple of days, it goes away. So it is so interesting to what you're saying. And then the other work I do is the energy codes, Dr. Sue Morter's energy codes. I've been training in that. And it's the same, it's that breathing into where whatever the sensation is you're feeling, breathing in and through it and up and down your central channel, and just allowing you to build the neurocircuitry that you need to allow it to whatever it is to, the energy to move more freely. So,
because it is energy.
All energy.
It is. It is. And we know now how consciously we can direct it. Yeah. And how about you, Terry?
Yeah, and that's where, for me, that's where the trust comes in. And, trust and belief are two different things. I can believe that we live in a wonderful universe, and that there is a power that's in control. But do I trust that power has my back? If I fall backwards, do I trust I'm going to be caught? So for me, trust is something that I've developed over the years. And it's at times been really shaken. There's been times when I go outside of my full belief in myself as spirit, that I'm taken care of. When I look around and see, chaos, when I look and see what I can find there that's not going right, then my trust gets a little bit shaken. But if I stay in the knowledge of who I am and what is in the world, that there is, it's a world of contrast, and I'm only looking at one side of it. If I look at the whole picture, then I go back into trust, and I go back into the knowing that, yeah, if I fall backwards, I know I'm going to come back up. So it's something I don't think we can really learn it. I think we have to feel it, and we have to have that knowingness inside that it's okay to trust.
Yeah, I mean that's really an important point as well. And and just as we go deeper into practices, whatever the practices are, and you earlier said, there's a million different, ways that we can build immunity at all of these levels. Practicing brings more trust. The more we practice, the more we learn, the more we can find that knowing. So that it's actually just, dovetails hand in hand with the practice itself. So so expanding out now into our collective and into our society, especially right now, where do you feel that our species needs the greatest immunity? What does that bring up for you? Where do we need the greatest immunity for ourselves collectively?
I would love to replace the word immunity with resilience. Just in order to answer the question. I mean, clearly we're in a moment in our history that is characterized by lots of conflict right now. And I think that we need resilience and trust and honesty and love to be able to navigate this very difficult situation. And for people that are watching this at a later date, we're having
So it looks like Mira froze up a little bit. While we'll give her a few seconds to come back, I think what she was about to say there is that at a later date, we here on the Broader Edge are going to be focusing specifically on the riots, the protests that are happening.
And I'm grateful for this, being faced with a call to, did I stall there?
You froze up a little bit, so you might want to backtrack by about a minute.
So,
and I mentioned that we would be focusing on the riots and the protests, along with the injustice and the oppression that's going on right now. And so back up just a little bit to tell us what it was that you were saying.
That what we need is resilience. We need to strengthen ourselves, to look deeply into ourselves with great honesty and compassion, to recognize our own deep prejudices that are oftentimes invisible, and to educate ourselves about the lives and experiences of people that we have probably not wanted to look at deeply previously, because it's shameful. It's shameful, it's embarrassing, it's frightening, it's saddening to see the kinds of injustices that are in our country. And I think it's a gift to us now that it's present in our it gives us an opportunity to heal that. And in order to heal that, in order to address that, we need great courage and great internal strength. to be able to face it with honesty and compassion.
Mm-hmm. Liz, what were you feeling around that?
My thought when you brought up what kind of immunity we need, I think it's really intriguing that what has happened, first of all, with COVID is there's been an issue of the ability to breathe. And then with George Floyd, he said, "I can't breathe." And so it really makes me wonder if what's missing is breath. And I equate breath with spirit. And so I would say that perhaps what's most needed is spiritual immunity, is a return to spirit. And in whatever form you believe that is, whether you think it's energy or you believe it's the Holy Spirit or whatever it is, but because I think if we can return to spirit, we can return to a recognition that we are all connected, and we are all connected through love, the energy that is love. And if that's the truth, then all of the horrible things that we're seeing will be able to disappear with work. But I think that's the fundamental change that needs to happen, the shift that we need to see.
Beautifully said. Really beautifully said. Oh, it's very touching too. Really touches my spirit. And Terry?
Yes, I'm in agreement with that, Liz. And, I believe that everything that we are experiencing as we perceive it to be outside of ourselves is there for us to look at. It's a mirror for what's inside of us. So if we're seeing the rioting, if we're seeing anger, if we're seeing the injustice, like Mira said, where is that showing up inside of me? So I think the more we can go inside and get it more in touch with our spiritual self and really work on those things, if we want to see change in the world, we have to be the change. We have to be the one to make that first step, to reach out our hand in that first handshake. We have to do the action of what we want to see in others. We have to walk that walk and walk our talk. So I really see that it's going to take some effort on everyone's part. One person can't do this. One community can't do this. The COVID happened globally for a reason. It shut down the whole world for a reason, so that we had that time to really assess and look at these things. And now it's like it's all being played out. It's like all of those things that we had time to sit and figure out what's inside of me that I need to work on. What's the change that I want to see when I come out of this isolation? I think most of us ask that question.
Yep.
What do I want to see? What kind of world do I want to live in when I'm able to get back integrated into society again? So it's going to take all of us remembering what we said was important. The compassion is important. Respect for each other. That was my big one. Respect and showing peace in the world instead of showing disruption. So I think this is all coming up to be healed. That's what I feel. It's really there to be healed, and it has to begin inside. It has to begin with each person. I've been a peace advocate for years, and my motto is peace begins with me. And it's so true. It has to start inside of us before it can go out into the world. So that's my take on it. We need more of all of that spectrum, the compassion, the respect, the love, and really getting to our roots in our spirituality and putting that out there. Just keep putting it out into the world in a positive way.
Well, that really speaks to my heart too. I really feel those words, and that leads into the next question I was going to ask was, so what is one thing specifically in terms of speaking or acting or reaching out in some way? What what is it that you feel that you could do to expand your own immunity and to expand that collectively? And so, Terry, so we're talking about, reaching peace, which is so important, so critical. And what a world this would be if every person went into that practice. And so thinking about how can we express that? How can we reach out? How can we touch the world? How can we touch others specifically? In addition to the inner work, what can we do?
Well, I'm glad you said that, in addition to the inner work, because the inner work by itself is not enough. And I'm thinking still about our circumstances right now, not even so much with COVID, but with our culture. And what we can do is we can educate ourselves to the experience of others. We can engage in compassionate listening and compassionate conversation. There's a lot that we can do. We can donate to organizations that support our, the vision that we have for a new future that's equitable. And why does this support immunity? Because one thing that we've learned with COVID is that we're connected. Globally, we're globally connected, and harm to another is harm to myself. And so as we start recognizing that protecting or uplifting others uplifts us all, then we can hopefully start to make a difference from that internal place of peace and compassion and connection.
That's really constructive and proactive energy there. Yeah.
I totally agree. And one of my mentors is Lisa Nichols. She's very well known motivator, and she has been very silent through all of this. Lisa is a very beautiful Black woman who just leads with her heart. And so her followers have been upset because she has been quiet. And she came out today and I listened to her speak, and it was so beautiful. And she said, I had to go into prayer because I had to really connect and get right with me before I opened my mouth to speak. And she urges everyone to do that, to first get right in yourself and then to take the action. And there's many things that you can do. There's many ways you can use your voice. And I think also it's very interesting that with COVID, many voices were shut down because you couldn't breathe. And then with this incident that happened, that was the catalyst for everything that's going on. Those words of "I can't breathe" were what stuck in everybody's mind. So it's time for us to now use our voice to open up that throat chakra and to be powerful. We are powerful. We hold the power. We can put somebody in office. We can take them out of office. So it's time for us to look at what would be the most constructive action that I can take. And to come from that heart-centered place, though, not to come from just an immediate knee-jerk reaction of anger and destruction, which is what we're seeing a lot of. But there are also those like Lisa that have been secluded in that time of prayer and that time of really figuring it out. How do we move forward from this? What can I do? And that's what we all need to be asking ourselves. What can I do? And like Mira said, get educated, find out what's out there. See what it is that you can get involved in, what effort, what peace movement, whatever it is that speaks to your heart. But do something after your time of sitting in prayer and in really becoming okay with yourself again, to then step out and do something and make a difference. We all have to do this.
Powerful words.
And that giving in whatever form we choose is actually an incredible boost to our immunity. It's been proven, research has shown us that the giving, the fulfillment, the meaning we get from that. And so we don't do it for ourselves, but the result is that we actually do boost our immunity, which just kind of comes full circle for the conversation. But I agree. I mean, social impact is my thing. And so I'm all about encouraging everyone to get involved wherever it is your heart is drawn. Because there are so many causes out there, and they are all interconnected. We call it intersectionality. You can't focus on one without the other. And so it doesn't matter where you focus, wherever your heart is drawing you, become involved, do something. And it can be time, talent, or treasure. It doesn't, if you feel like you don't have the means financially right now, you can give of your time or your talent. The other thing that I'm doing is, and I'm involved with a circle of women who are talking about this, honestly about this. And so I love that we do the inner work, and then I love that we come together in community to really talk it out and see what we can learn from each other. So I would encourage that as well. Find a group of friends, or even better yet, people that you don't know who want to come together and really have solid conversations and ask the hard questions, and then determine what steps we can take.
Oh, important points. I mean, just the expression itself builds immunity for all of us together. And your other point of it being, authentic to you, whatever it is that's authentic to you, another immune builder. And let us all do that collectively. So what are your last thoughts, or anything that has come up for you just during this hour on how you will move forward from here? Is there anything that you might do differently now, or add to your life at this point?
Well, for me, there's more engagement in maybe not news, but education, in particularly around race and race relation, because what seems, we're all privileged white women, and what seems logical or obvious or comprehensible to us does not, or incomprehensible. I think that there's an entirely different experience that people of color have been subjected to, that we just can't comprehend. And so it's beholden to us not to be righteous in our assumptions, but to be digging in to learn, and with compassion, and recognize that we don't know, we can't know. And so it's like walk a mile in someone's shoes. And so for me, that's what's up, is learning and having these conversations, these difficult conversations with people. So that's what's next for me.
And I would just build on that, Mira. I love what you're saying. And I would add that for me, what's become really apparent is it's very difficult to find information that you can trust, going back to the trust factor. I mean, it's not enough to turn on the nightly news and think that you're getting full information. No. And so if we really want to get to the bottom of what's going on across the nation and around the world, we have to find other sources. And that has been a really, really it started with COVID for me, and now it's become even more clear that we have to figure out how to get good, truthful information so that we can make decisions based upon that.
What I just have to jump in. One of the things that I mean when I talk about education, there are a lot of people that are putting out information now about racism and the dynamics of it. For instance, there's a book called How to Be an Anti-Racist, and I can find the author's name as we're talking, but I think it's beholden to us to educate ourselves in that way, not watching the news per se, but to be reading commentaries, to be looking at lists of actions that are possible. Greenpeace put out a whole list of resources. And this article that I read on Vox, VOX, it was called Stop Saying All Lives Matter. And why? Because Black lives matter too, not more than, but as much as other lives. And understanding the nuance that is not necessarily obvious for people that are not engaged in the movement. So that's what I mean by education and rooting out invisible prejudice within ourselves. That's what I meant.
Ladies, I think for me it is just getting out there more. I do a lot online, but I feel like we're able now to go out into communities. So letting myself be seen and seeing everybody, and I mean fully seeing them. How many times have we walked down an aisle in a grocery store and there's just bodies there, not, they're just like maybe in our way even of what we're trying to get to. But to really acknowledge everyone that we see, to look them eye to eye. And I noticed over the last couple of days, I was making that effort, and there were those that they're just like focused, head focused down or focused on, whatever it is that they're doing. So I think it's going to take that effort, and I'm willing to do that effort more and more of really seeing those people that I come into contact with. I think that's when we're going to lose that separation thought that we are separate and know that that's me. That person is me. And, as I look at them, just look at their heart, not look at anything else other than their heart. And so that's my commitment.
And Terry, just as you speak those words, it brings up the vision of being out or in the grocery store or where have you, and with everyone wearing the masks, what's visible is the eyes, and eyes are the windows to the soul. So we'll hopefully we'll have more eye contact with each other. So to the listeners, I hope that you've had some expanded ideas with us today and some more, practices to draw from. Hopefully we will be able to be more expressive, to use our authenticity and to just expand in numerous ways, and so that our lives will be stronger and healthier and happier collectively as we head into these days and these years together. So Terry, were there any posted comments that came in that you'd like to voice?
Oh, we had a beautiful audience. There were a lot of comments that responded to our whole conversation as it flowed.
Oh, good.
One comment I would like to read is from Gabby Forrester, and she said, "My intention is to come from love with every single being that I interact with."
Yes, that's beautiful. Thank you, Gabby. So I thank all of you, my co-hosts and the listeners, and we do ask the listeners to share us on Facebook, Twitter, whatever groups you might be in, and join us on our Facebook page as well. Post comments on our Facebook page, anything else that comes to mind from this conversation. And you'll also find us on YouTube and Enlightened World Network as well. We're here for candid and spiritual conversations. So join us back in 2 weeks on June 18th. And Terry's going to be leading our conversation. Do you know yet what that topic will be, Terry?
Well, I think it's going to be very pertinent, again, to the issues going on. And I'd like for us to explore, what do I desire? We kind of touched on that today. What do I desire? If we don't know what we want, then how do we expect the collective energy to know what it wants? So we're going to talk about, again, what's happening in the world and how we can take action and really get to know what that action might be.
Ooh, it sounds fascinating. I can't wait for that. Okay, very good. Thank you all, and goodbye. We'll see you on Facebook and back here live in 2 weeks.
Thanks for joining us on The Broader Edge. Our mission is to empower and engage you in shaping our tomorrow because your impact matters. Help us spread the word by liking and sharing on social media. Be sure to join us on alternate Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern on Enlightened World Network for candid conversations that envision a new future. The information, views and opinions expressed by the Broader Edge co-hosts, guests and associates are intended to inspire and empower you and should not be construed as medical, psychological, financial or legal advice.